Thank you, Walter. It's very nice to be here. And I was kind of popped in at the end of Jamie's talk, and I saw there's several folks here who are either new to homeschooling or new to homeschool connections. So that's always neat when I get to mingle with the newbies who are just dipping their foot into this vast world of homeschooling. And I'm very excited to for what you guys are getting into, and just to be here to talk to y'all. As Walter said, I've been with Homeschool Connections since, gosh, I think it's been 2009, and I've been homeschooling since 2002. So it's been a little bit longer than 15 years now. So today I'm going to be talking on the subject of dealing with sluggish boys. And this is something that I wrote about on the Homeschool Connections blog last year, and it got a whole lot of traffic and conversation. I ended up going on the Al Cresta show to talk about it and all these different things. There seemed to be a lot of interest in this subject. So I'm going to kind of expand on what I talked about in that article on this issue of sluggish. Specifically, it was called "Dealing with Teenage Male Sloth" is what the article was called. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Some reasons why, if you have a teenage boy, why he might seem sluggish or lazy, ways to deal with that, and just some perspectives and idea and kind of ways of viewing this that you have to keep in mind when you're dealing with teenage boys. So the lazy teenage boy, this is really it's so universal. It's like a stereotype in American culture. This the trope of the boy that's like, "Oh, mom, I don't want to take out the trash. Why are you guys always on my case? I just want to play my music." It's like it's so common in movies and television. It's even the basic plot conflict in many family dramas, like the kid who just wants his parents to get off his case, right? It's a very common thing. Um, but like any stereotype, the lazy teen versus the overbearing parent dichotomy is very exaggerated. But that doesn't mean that sloth among teenage boys isn't real. Usually, when we have such a pervasive stereotype, it's because there's a kernel of truth at the heart of it, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Um, I would actually argue that slothfulness is a bigger threat to teenage boys today than it's ever been in the past. And there's various reasons for this. Of course, many people are going to point right to digital distractions like video games or social media. I would also draw attention to the decline of unstructured play. This is play that is spontaneous and it's unsupervised. There's a big decline in unstructured play these days. There's also a culture of instant gratification that contributes to building a culture of sloth among our youth, and it appears to affect boys in particular. And I'll go into some reasons for this. So before we go any further, though, we should define what sloth is exactly, because a lot of times sloth is used interchangeably with the word laziness, like as if sloth is just an old-fashioned word for being lazy. But sloth is not mere laziness. We all get lazy sometimes. If you were to check in at my house at about 4:30 p.m. on Thanksgiving Day, I'm going to be pretty lazy at that point. I'm going to be in a turkey coma, laying in my recliner in front of my wood stove with my eyes half open and a little bit of drool coming out of my mouth. Like I'm going to be pretty darn lazy at that moment. But that's not being slothful. Sloth is something different. Sloth is not mere laziness or just resting or laying around. Sloth is more habitual. It's like a preference for ease and comfort. It is a reluctance to do hard things. Sometimes you can have a physical slothfulness, like when somebody has a reluctance to do hard work, or there's even such a thing as intellectual slothfulness. This is when you have an aversion to making like a mental effort to learn something new. Like when you realize that something is going to take mental effort, you kind of mentally check out and lose interest. Um, and because sloth is a kind of reluctance of effort, it's often accompanied by indifference or boredom. And this makes sense because if you're reluctant to do anything, then the corollary is you feel like you never have anything to do, right? So sloth is generally a disposition towards whatever is easy and whatever is comfortable. It's a habitual preference for the path of least resistance, like a habitual preference for whatever is easiest, whatever can get me through in the shortest amount of time with the least amount of effort, cutting corners to just get through so I can go back to being inactive. So it's like a habitual reluctance to exert effort. Now, we can consider this from multiple perspectives. Psychologically, a slothful character can be detrimental to like a full human development simply because a slothful person will fail to develop the skills necessary to rouse themselves and overcome the challenges that life presents. Life is pretty darn challenging. There's a lot of obstacles that get thrown at us in our lives that require effort, that require momentum to overcome them. And I think God gives these things to us so that we might develop our character in the face of challenges. It says in the book of Acts, through many tribulations we must enter the kingdom of heaven. But it follows that a person who is slothful, who is reluctant to engage with effort, um, is simply never going to rise to meet those challenges. They're going to spend their life in avoidance of challenge. And this gives rise to people for whom every effort is too hard or not worth the energy, not worth the time. When faced with a challenge, they're going to shrink back from it and just be like, "Oh, I just can't even," That's what they say nowadays, right? I just can't even. Oh, hashtag adulting. So sloth can make people impotent from the ability to meet life's challenges head on and overcome them and be successful, either professionally or just personally. But then also, we could consider slothfulness from a spiritual perspective, where in our tradition, it's one of the seven cardinal sins. Cardinal comes from a Latin word cardo that means like a hinge or a pivot that something rotates around. So what this means is that a cardinal sin is like a pivot or a root of other sins. If you imagine like how the spokes on a wheel like converge at the center, that's like the pivot, right? So sloth is like a cardinal or pivotal sin that can cause us to neglect our obligations to friends, family, or even God. So, for example, if I have a slothful disposition, then it's like going to be like, oh, getting up in the morning to go to mass, I don't want to do it. I'm not going to go. I'm not going to do the rosary. Not going to do these things. So you can see how pervasive the effects of this are across a person's life if you have that disposition towards things. There is a saying that idle hands are the devil's plaything, and there's a lot of truth in that. Um, many men end up looking at pornography or involving themselves in sexual sins not because of lust, but because they're bored or restless, or they're just kind of like anxious and have nothing to do. So this is why the spiritual writers have considered sloth to be one of the seven cardinal sins. Now, to get back to teenage boys, why are teenage boys in particular prone to sloth? Why am I not just saying slothful teenagers and harping on this gender in particular? Well, boys tend biologically to be more active than girls, more energetic, more competitive, and more aggressive. And historically, there were lots of outlets for that in society. Boys got their energy out by participating in competitive sports, by unstructured play with friends, by manual labor, or in the old days, by going out in and making war and plundering the villages of your opponent. So modern society, however, has methodically quashed these outlets for masculine aggression. We have school systems that tend to keep people in a chair in front of a screen for 6 hours a day. Um, Even in the workplace, jobs are increasingly less physical and more mind numbing. There's a lot more sitting in front of computers, right? Sitting in a chair. And there's a lot of social pressure against free range play. And if you don't believe me, just take your young kids and drop them off downtown, let them wander around and see how quick someone complains that there's unsupervised kids just wandering around. We've all heard these stories of parents having social services called because they let their kids play and go to the park by themselves, right? For this horrific sin of modernity of letting the kid go to the park by themselves. So, um, boys' brains are increasingly pumped full of digital content that is meant to be addictive. There is a social messaging out there right now that masculine energy is toxic. And to be honest, since the sexual revolution, modern structures of school and workplace environments are gynocentric. That is, they're structured to cater to female sensitivities, to be comfortable for women. So, taking all these things into consideration cumulatively, it's not any wonder that boys can seem crushed, despondent, or apathetic given the kind of social atmosphere that everybody's dealing with right now. And of course, in our homeschool, we have a lot of ability to counteract these social tendencies. Uh, so we have to also look at our own role in our child's, if our children are exhibiting slothful habits, because we can counteract them or we can actually empower them, right? We can empower them or we can counteract them. And this can happen. Like, are we coddling our boys? Are we pampering them? Are we enabling them to lead a lazy lifestyle? Sometimes there's differences in the way we treat our boys from the way we treat our girls. I've noticed this in my own life before, where I noticed that I was just giving my girls more chores and letting my son do less. I don't know why. I just kind of noticed it one day years ago. One of my daughters was like, "You give us a lot of work and you only give him like one chore a day." And I was like, "You know what? That's true. I am doing that, and I don't know why." Um, so sometimes, and I realized like, okay, I'm kind of empowering him to just if he's sitting around playing games all day, I need to make him more active. So it behooves us to examine our own way that we interact with our children, right? Now, thankfully, the upshot of this is that as parents, we have more influence over our children than anyone else, especially if we are homeschooling parents and our children are home with us more than their public school counterparts would be. So if our sons are bogged down in a slothy rut, we can help them to break free. And I'm going to give some suggestions that I've used in my own life and just that I've seen at work in other boys' lives, among the many, many families that I've come to know over my long many years working in the homeschooling field, to kind of help break them out of this if they're into it. Now, first, and I'm putting this first because I think this is the easiest thing to change, and it's very, very important and very overlooked, which is diet. Um, we tend to look at sloth as a moral issue first. We tend to think like, oh, bad habits, laziness, whatever. But I would start by just looking at diet. Diet plays a massive role in mood, and it directly correlates to our energy levels. So a diet that's heavy in certain foods will make you feel tired and stressed. I just made a joke about if you were to see me on Thanksgiving, 4:30 p.m. But it's true that I don't remember the name of the chemical, but one of the parents probably knows. But there's something in turkey that makes you tired, right? But there's lots of food that's like that. There's food that can make you feel tired, feel feel stressed out, that can diminish your energy levels. Lisa says tryptophan. Thank you, Lisa. Tryptophan. Um, so examples of foods that can make you tired are like a lot of processed foods, things with industrial seed oils, things with added and refined sugars, fried foods, and foods that are heavy in artificial sweeteners. These things all they tend to like give you a very brief momentary energy boost, but they don't give you the kind of lasting energy that's going to get you through the day. Now, don't get me wrong, there are no bad, I don't believe that there's any bad foods, right? I don't think there's bad foods. Any of these things are okay in moderation. Really, there's just input and output. There's just if you put this in, you're going to get this out. And if a boy's diet contains a preponderance of such things, like cumulatively, if he's eating a lot of those sort of things, he's going to get a low energy output. Like I said, they might give you a momentary boost, but in terms of carrying you through the day or the week, you're not going to get a lot out of that stuff. That's why you might eat a bunch of like McDonald's or something, and then I still feel hungry like 2 hours later because it ultimately doesn't give you a lot of lasting energy. And if you're going on an energy deficit, then the body wants to conserve energy because it's not getting enough. And the way the body will do this is by reducing involuntary movement. Um, like through the day, we move around a lot, right? And that expends energy. But when your body's trying to conserve energy, it's going to make you want to lay around, right? It's going to make you lethargic. So I would first look at the diet. Boys' diets in particular should be protein heavy with a balance of macronutrients to maximize energy reserves and also promote muscle development because boys' muscle development is much greater than girls' muscle development during puberty, which we'll talk about a little later. So first thing I would do is just look at the diet, like what are you eating, and change that because that's the easiest thing to change, right? That's a lot easier than rewiring whole behaviors is just change diet. So that's the first thing I would look at is your kid's diet. Okay, now number two, to move into like some behavior modification suggestions. Encourage your boys to live lives of intentionality. Intentionality. And this means that whatever they are doing it with deliberateness and with focus. How often do you ever walk in and you see your boy, I don't know, maybe he's sitting on the couch, scrolling on his phone, maybe he's just he's just sitting down, laying in bed, I don't know, or just walking around in the house annoying his siblings. And you get kind of annoyed and you say, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Nothing." Like we've all had this with our kids, right? What are you doing? Nothing. Um, Intentionality means encourage him to be doing something. When we're teaching boys to be intentional, we are giving them opportunities to get him moving and doing something, whether it's a chore, homework, or just go outside and play, do something artistic, go do something. But intentionality is much more than just assigning activities. It's about inculcating a task-oriented mindset in your son. And I'm going to come hit on this point over and over again. Task-oriented mindset. Teach your son to think in terms of what am I doing right now? What do I need to get done today? What should I be focusing my energy on? Like think about tasks, right? What should I be focusing on right now? Now, there's nothing wrong with leisure time by any means, but like anything else, leisure time needs to be rightly ordered. Now, this is especially true if we're looking at things like social media and gaming. These activities should be set aside for leisure time. They should not be your son's normative occupation. So leisure time is refreshment and rest from our labors. It's not the default setting. What boys should be doing through most of the day is like, okay, I have to get this done. Then when that's done, I'm going to do this. And I also have to get this done. Get them to start thinking with intentionality. What am I doing right now? Where am I on my list of things? What's the rest of the day looking like? Right? And men really naturally take to this. Men in general really like thinking in terms of like accomplishing tasks. And so if you can really introduce this kind of intentionality into the way they structure their day, as they get used to it, they're really going to take to it because they will find it natural in a certain sense. Speaking of things that are natural, my next piece of advice, number 3, is to get them out into nature. Sloth, this has been very helpful in my life because I'll be honest, I have a reputation for doing a lot of work, like people are always like, oh, he's so prolific, he's always doing this or that. But like, I have no middle ground. I'm either like a ball of energy or I'm like laying on the couch looking at the ceiling for 4 hours. I find it hard to have a balance, or I did until I started incorporating regular time in nature into my life. Sloth and boredom often go hand in hand, as I said earlier. And one of the sad side effects of sloth is that it entails a loss of wonder, a sense of not being impressed by anything that life has to offer. And a good counter to this is to get your son out in nature. I've done this in my own life. I've done this with my son, and it's very helpful to just get out into nature to help rekindle a sense of wonder at the beauty that's all around us. So this is very simple too. Go on a family hike. If you have a national park or something nearby, go to a park. Tell your son to go explore if you live in the country. Get him outside with the sun's brightness on his face, the firmness of the earth beneath his feet, the wind blowing in his hair. Um, the mental and emotional benefits of being exposed to nature are very well attested. If you've never read about the mental health benefits of being outside in nature, go look that up. And there's a lot of studies on this that people that have regular exposure to nature just feel better about life in general. They report better levels of energy, mental well-being, how they feel about themselves. So make sure that your son is getting regular time outdoors. Now, if you aren't in an area that's conducive to romping around outside, you're obviously going to have to create these opportunities by heading like to a nature reserve or a park. Um, Now, sometimes people will say, "Oh, my son doesn't want to go." Like I say, "Let's go for a walk," and he just doesn't want to go. Force him. That's what that's the simple answer. Just force him to go. Um, I've had to force my son to go, but I've never heard him after we gone be like, "I hated that. I'm mad that you forced me to go outside." Like, there's a certain inertia you have to overcome, right, with momentum. But once you get the ball rolling, I've never had him complain about it after the fact. So I think getting kids out in nature is really good. And also, this isn't just for young, I mean, for yourselves too. If you guys never get out into nature, everybody should. The mental and emotional health benefits of nature time are wonderful. Um, Walter says geocaching. Yeah, that's a great thing. Um, Another opportunity, if your son is on the older side that you've probably thought of or talked to him about, is getting a job. Now, most boys typically want to get a job when they get older, but I don't know if we've considered employment specifically as an antidote to sloth. But it's a really good one because the routine and discipline that a job requires of you are excellent counterbalances to sloth, because they just force you into a routine and they force you to exert effort, right? There's a reason that a job is called work. um, but not to mention also the motivational power of a regular paycheck. Money really will help facilitate the task-oriented mindset because what boys tend to do when they get money is they tend to think about it in a task-oriented way. Like they think, okay, I got $100 this week. If I just do the same thing for 4 weeks, then I'll have $400. Once I have $400, I can buy X. And then once I get X, if I keep doing more work, then I can get this. And they start thinking in terms of like planning what they're going to do, how they're going to allocate their resources, and how they're going to use their time and their employment and resources to meet their goals, right? I remember when I was like 13, I asked my dad to buy me a bicycle, and he was like, "No, I bought you two bikes. I bought you one when you were 6. I bought you one when you were 10. I'm not buying you another one." He's like, "You're gonna have to get a job." So I was like, So I went and got a job at a place washing dishes until I saved up enough money to buy a bike. And then once I got the bike, my job opportunities increased because now I could ride my bike to wherever I needed to get to work more. And then once I could do that, I started thinking, I'm going to be 16 in a year and a half. If I save up X amount of money, then I can get a car. And so I started working towards that goal. So getting a job is a helpful thing, like especially in terms of like the monetary incentive. It helps facilitate that task-oriented mindset. So if your son is old enough, consider getting him a part-time job, apprenticeship outside the home, or even starting a business. I had a kid in my co-op that, like, when he was still in high school, he started a lawn business, and we all kind of joked about it because on his first day he crashed his mower into his mom's garage. It was like, oh, nice start to your business there, kid. But you know what? That was 8 years ago. Now he's got a very big lawn business and he's got employees under him, and he's doing pretty darn good. So I'm really proud of the guy. So anyhow, a job or something that has monetary compensation is very good. Now, number five is related, and that's the good old fashioned sweat of the brow. This is just the tried and true antidote for sloth is hard work. So when I'm talking about getting a job, I'm talking about something they actually get money for. But with hard work, it's like just doing stuff that is hard, whether or not you're getting paid for it. In the old days, this might have meant just chores on the farm. This could mean volunteering somewhere, like you're going down to spend time. I see TJ in the comments says volunteering opportunities at an equine therapy place. That's a great example of something that just caused you to put in effort. Not everybody has a farm, obviously. Not everyone has somewhere right down the road where they can go volunteer, but there's multiple ways you can put your son to work. Last year, my son and we started waking up every morning and going to the gym together, right? Now, besides the bonding that takes place when a father and a son do something like that, besides the self-esteem boost of him watching his muscles grow slowly over the year, it disciplines him to get up early and start his day with something difficult, right? And I think going to the gym is a very good habit, or working out in general, because the type of planning and incremental growth that characterizes strength training builds that goal-oriented mindset. But in general, any sort of like labor, my son regularly has to deal with things like firewood. Mowing the lawn is his job. There's various other like labor intensive things that he has to do. So something that's physical is very helpful. You can also let your son tackle like various man of the house jobs. Last year, I made my son install a radio in my car. He was sitting around. I saw him just sitting around, like scrolling on his phone. And I kind of tossed him a box with a brand new car radio in it. I'm like, go install this. And I put some tools in his hand. And he's, of course, he protested. I don't know how to do this. I just gave him my phone and I said, here's a YouTube tutorial on how to do it. And I sent him out to my car. And he came back 20 minutes later, face beaming, the job done successfully. I've had him replace the faucet in my kitchen, various things like that. So doing like man around the house sort of stuff that they can do is really good. Now, by the way, there's going to be some risk involved in this. Like when I sent him out to my car to install the stereo, you run the risk that he's going to botch it. You run the risk when you let him do the faucet that it's going to be like, and it's going to be some nightmare. But honestly, risk is important. I think you have to deal with risk in these situations, whether it's about letting your son kind of branch off on his own or do something that you're not sure if he has it in him to do. The risk is important. And this is really where teenage boys thrive, is in that like moving into autonomy, opportunities to move to inch closer into autonomy. I think about when I was little and lived on a lake, and all the neighborhood boys, we'd always be out on the lake in the winter, seeing like kind of like tiptoeing on the ice, like, okay, it's safe here, putting your foot out a little bit. Can I step here? Maybe I can step a little further, like just kind of testing the ice. This is how boys are. They take to opportunities to kind of test themselves, step out a little bit further into the realm of autonomy. And even there's a little bit of risk, that's just something you have to be willing to undertake. So when I make him replace the faucet, I understand that I might be in there with a bucket and 10 beach towels in an hour, helping him clean up. But it's something that you have to do, because as they say, no risk, no reward, right? So men have to learn, boys, when they're young, have to learn to, deal with risk, and you do as well as a parent. So like I said, Putting them to work. Boys, males in general are naturally task oriented. We thrive on getting things done. So get your son involved in projects that nurture his sense of accomplishment. It can be manual labor, it can be chores, it can be volunteering. It doesn't really matter. It's a project that will task him a little bit physically and mentally and leave him with a sense of accomplishment, right? Something that he will be like, darn, I'm glad I did that. I'm glad I learned how to do that. Okay, and finally, and this is really important, this is about you. You need to manage your expectations. Um, Teenagers' bodies are going through a lot, right? Male puberty in particular can come on hard and fast. And male puberty is different than female puberty, right? We know that boys tend to go through puberty later than girls, but it's very different. Boys and girls going into puberty, they have about 80% lean muscle mass. But when girls go through puberty, they actually lose a bit of muscle mass as they gain adipose tissue, which is like the reservoir for fat reserves. And this is in preparation for, to prepare a young woman's body in the future for the rigors of childbearing, right? But when boys go through puberty, their muscle mass actually increases considerably, up to 90% lean muscle mass. And so when our boys hit puberty, right, they sprout up like weeds and suddenly they are big, they're tired, and they're hungry, right? So you have to try to distinguish between sloth as like a life habit versus just your adolescent boy's natural tiredness because of these changes. Your son sleeping until 10:30 and then rolling out of bed and eating 5 eggs and 2 sandwiches might not be indicative of sloth. That's just what they do. Now, your son laying on the couch, doom scrolling for 2 hours on his phone and not wanting to go outside or do anything, that might be a different story, right? So you have to try to discern what is due to biology and what is like a life choice. What is due to the fact that their bodies are changing and they're turning into young men, and what is due to the fact of them having bad habits. You know what I mean? You have to accommodate the former while offering guidance on the latter. And also, I want you to stop to consider that, maybe your boy isn't as lazy or slothful as you think. If you've come to this talk on teenage boy slothfulness, maybe you're thinking like, yeah, that's something my son struggles with. But first, I'd ask you to also think like, is your own perception of that correct? The brains of males and females are wired differently in how we appropriate tasks. When it comes to priorities and tasks, women tend to equalize them. And there's this saying in psychology that women are multitaskers. Women are very good at like, okay, I've got this cooking here and I'm talking to my child here and I'm trying to clean this and I'm trying to think about this. They're very good. And when they have a bunch of tasks, women like to equalize them all. But males approach tasks different. We tend to put them in hierarchical order. We tend to take things and structure them and be like, first I'm doing this, then I'm doing this, then I'm doing this. And so you see your boy and maybe he's sitting there just plodding along at this one thing and you expect him to maybe be doing other things. You're like, look, I'm over here, I'm cleaning, I'm cooking, I'm doing this. And you're just sitting here doing this one thing. You haven't done the other things I told you to do yet. And it might irritate you. But it might be just that he's processing how he needs to engage with his tasks differently. Boys can be really constant and really good at one task at a time, right? And things that aren't on their priority, it's going to get shelved. You might notice this talking to husbands as well, right? Your husband might be doing one thing and you tell him something that needs to be done and he's like, okay. And then you can tell that in his brain, it gets put on a back shelf somewhere, right? And he's going to get to it later. That's kind of how men think about things. If you give a boy too many things to do, if you're on his case all the time about things, if you're pointing out every little mistake he's making, this can overload him, can make him get discouraged, make him give up. It won't help him. It won't help you. And boys tend to get discouraged if you're scolding them, So I would just challenge you to think about that too. Is my son actually have a problem with sloth, or is he just prioritizing how he engages with his tasks differently than I would do it? And that's something that really needs to be considered before you start getting frustrated or scolding him or anything like that. So to wrap it up, I understand it can be frustrating to see traits of like laziness in your boys, especially because we tend to project our frustration into the future. We see our son sitting there, maybe laying on the couch looking at his phone, or he's like, we catch him, he's been gaming for 3 hours straight or something. And we fear that he's always going to be that way, that like, oh my gosh, he's going to be still doing this when he's 40, you know. We project these bad scenarios into the future. But and we take it personally too. We take it personally as a judgment on our parenting. Like, oh, what did I do to raise him with these habits, right? So sometimes we can make the problem seem bigger than it is, and it can give us a lot of anxiety. But there's no need to worry about it because with a little structure, a little understanding, you can nurture habits of hard work and discipline in your boys so that they grow into men who are task oriented, who don't shrink from challenges, and who do display the energy and resourcefulness necessary to meet the obstacles head on that life will throw in their way. So that is it. That's my talk. Thank you.
That's your talk, and you're sticking to it, right?
I'm sticking to it.
All right. Well, thanks, Philip. Yeah, you see the applause coming in.
Wow,
That's
that's a lot of clapping emojis.
It's a lot
I'm
of
taking a
clapping.
screenshot of that so I can prove I was popular once.
Well, if it means anything, there's more than just clapping. There's also questions that have come in. So,
Oh, okay, cool.
and I want to encourage everyone again to ask your questions in the Q&A panel, and I will get to them as we can. We have some time though. That's the good thing. So, Janine asks, do you have any advice on boys? I'm sorry, on working with boys who strongly oppose healthy foods?
Like where you want them to eat healthy and they just don't want to.
Yeah. I'm guessing that's what she mean. You know, it. There's so, like you said, there's a lot of processed food. There's a lot of
Yeah,
access
so
that it's easy to make processed food. It's harder to make fresh food, and that's the idea anyway.
yeah, so with diet, in order for any dietary changes to be effective, they have to be sustainable. So it's not realistic to take a kid who's just been eating unhealthy stuff and just be like, I'm just wiping the table of this and we're going to be just eating all this healthy stuff. You want to introduce it in a measured way, where it's like they're not having access to the stuff they used to eat, but there's kind of like a gradual reduction in the quantities of it, right? Where you're saying like, okay, yes, I have some of this, but if you want some of this, we're going to eat this also, right? Or you're making more healthy iterations of it, right? You're taking something that maybe there's something like French fries or something, or fried potatoes, and you're saying, okay, I'm making them with sweet potatoes or something, or maybe I'm even mixing sweet potatoes with fried potatoes. So you're slowly introducing healthier options. You're making the same things but replacing them with healthier alternatives. And you have to do it in a sustainable way. You can't just cut them off and be like, that's why I was careful to stress like there's no bad foods, you don't want to give them an unhealthy relationship with food. So I wouldn't say like just, we're not going to have any of this stuff, but you're going to try to slowly adjust it into a more moderate intake. And but I mean, ultimately, you're the parent. You control what gets purchased. Like you can purchase less unhealthy foods, and there can literally not be that available in the house.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. So another question came in. I shared custody with my son's dad, whose philosophy is totally opposite to all this. Can I ever do enough as a single mom, and where and how to find him a safe role model?
Yeah. So the answer is yes, but um, so parents have a lot of influence. Your child's father is having influence, but you have influence as well. In this situation, see, if you have a situation where one parent is putting them like on easy street, and you are like being the parent who challenges them, you're going to be at a disadvantage because like kind of like water wants to flow downhill, right? Path of least resistance. So if the other parent is doing things in a very easy way and you're like being hard, then the child is going to favor the other parent. So it's very important that you lead by example and not lead by trying to like you're not gonna like you're not how could I say it? You're not gonna nag your son out of it, you know, like if he's coming back from the father's house with habits you don't approve of, you're not going to get him to break out of them by telling him, you know, hey, you shouldn't be like this, you should be like that. It's going to be way more effective to just live these habits yourself so that your household has a sense of order and structure and security and things are managed well, and he can feel that and sense that and say the way that mom lives life is a good way, and I look up to that, you know, it's a better way to handle it. Because even though kids like things that are easy, yeah, if I let my kids watch TV for 9 hours a day, they will, right? You know, like if I tell them watch as much TV as you want, they will. But kids don't only want ease, they do want structure, you know? And if you provide that in a way that is very much leading by example and making them feel at home, and comfortable and secure, then there's value in that more so than if you're like, I don't like that you're doing this. I know your father, you know, lets you do this, but you know, that only get you so far and make kind of like resent what's going on at your place. So, I would say just lead by example and then leave the rest to God.
What about the second question? Safe role model. Have any ideas on that? I see
I
some
mean,
questions come up in chat. I think I saw Fraternus is an organization that perhaps it's a parish offering or a parent an organization that can be formed at a parish.
yeah,
But it could be
I really don't know that that's so specific. It depends on the specific males that people have available in their social circle, you know?
yeah, yeah, and you mentioned earlier about volunteering.
Yeah.
Sometimes by way of volunteering or by way of external activities, the young man might find someone there that he can look up to, that's kind of that role model that he longs for. And every guy longs for a role model. I mean, there's no doubt about it. There's just
Or it's
something
at least
about
more
that.
likely that he'll run into someone like that.
Yeah, exactly. Because I tell my own children, look, if you're having a hard time with your friends, right? Meaning the friends that they gravitate towards or have at the co-op or around the house, whatever. One of the better ways is to find friends is to go to a place where you already have a common interest, and your
Yeah.
common interest is shaped by the fact that you're volunteering there. So that might help.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I
hopefully that
agree.
helps, Anonymous. Another question came in. My only son is 12. I'm constantly nagging him to start school, to stay focused, to get back on top, or to get back on task. Stop making useless noises. Stop annoying his sisters. It's just constant. So that's someone's question
Stop
as much
making
as
useless noises. Oh, this kid sounds pretty cool. We should hire him, Walter.
yeah, I was gonna say that sounds very normal to me. Everything that I just read was something that's so normal for a 12-year-old boy.
Yeah. Is there a reason why he doesn't get moving in the morning?
uh that's HP doesn't it's
Oh, okay.
it's just a statement. So
Oh, okay. Okay,
she says
gotcha.
they say I
Um,
have no idea. So yeah.
yeah. Honestly, he sounds like a normal 12-year-old boy. Their 12-year-old boys are really annoying. Mine was too, and I've taught middle school for years. They go through that phase of being really annoying, and you know, sometimes there's no way except to grind through it. Now, obviously, like I said, I don't know. I don't know that just constantly nagging about it is going to work. But on the other hand, you can't just let it go. You know, you have to be firm with him, but also, you know what I found what makes it worse with 12-year-old boys is when they see that they're getting to you, like when they can see how much it annoys you, then that emboldens them. So I think you have to administer give them the discipline, the structure they need. But in as much as is possible, you have to try to be kind of like stoic about it to where it doesn't seem like he doesn't think he's getting to you, or it looks like you're not being flapped by it, even if you privately are, even if you need to go in the bathroom and be like, mommy's taking a shower, and just run the shower and weep for an hour, you know? But I would say like not let him see your irritation, be firm and be at least have the appearance of being unflappable. And then other than that, you have to grind through it for a year or so.
Yeah, what I have found, and without coming across too harsh, because sometimes I can be with my son, is ask the question, do you realize how inane that looks? Or how insidious that it's almost like a challenge to them. And I'm not saying it goes away, but it gives them at least some pause to think, well, I guess I never really thought about it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
I had not re sort of relevant. One of my favorite teaching moments ever was I was teaching in a live, like a in-person brick and mortar place once, and there was like a 12-year-old boy who was constantly giving everybody problems in class and giving me problems, and he could see he was really getting to me. And I was turning around writing on the board, and he put like, I heard all the class snickering, and when you're a teacher, you kind of have this, they call it the eyes in the back of your head sense, where I knew something was going on. And I turned around, and the kid had like gotten a bunch of paper towel and put it over his head and poked eye holes out of it like a ghost. And he was like going like this, and he written on the forehead of the paper towel in marker, it said, "I am a doofus," you know? And he was like goofing off. And just without even a second guess, I took my phone out and I took a picture of it. And then I had all their parents on my phone, and on my phone I was just like, text Mr. Johnson or what, and he was like, "Ah!" And I immediately sent it to his dad, and I was like, "This is what your kid's doing in class right now." And man, that kid like deflated like a balloon, and I never had a problem with him again.
yeah, I mean, you're kind of challenging them, right? In a way, you're challenging, like, hey, you really think about what you're doing.
Yeah,
To a young man, it means it's kind of a milestone event, because they begin to say, "Oh,
like I
I didn't
said,
think it was that bad."
boys do like to test the ice, or they like to butt heads, and sometimes you have to butt back, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. So Patty asked a question. Is there something, this might be one of our last questions that come in. We'll see.
Yeah, sure.
Patty asks, is there something to boys doing work later in the evening? Seems my teen and his friends prefer to do school late, frustrating us moms, but it seems common.
I I've noticed that too sometimes. I don't know. They each have their own routines. Like, I noticed that my son likes to do physical things later in the day. Like, I'm always trying to get him up at like 6 a.m. and be like, let's go work out. And he's always like, nah, let's work out after lunch. Whereas since I'm 43, after lunch, I want to fall asleep. So I don't know. They have different rhythms of how they prefer their day. But one of the beautiful things about homeschooling is you don't have to stick to a set a pattern. We have this idea kind of inculcated in us from public school that like school starts at 8 a.m. or whatever it is, and it ends at 3. Why? Who said it has to? That's kind of like a public school idea. If you want to get your homeschool day started at noon and run it till 7 p.m., and that works better in your household, there's no reason you can't do it. So one of the first things that I always think about with questions of like time management and when something happens and when I think it should happen is I ask myself, is there any good reason why it has to happen this way, or is it just arbitrary? Like, do I have to start school at 9 a.m. because we have X, Y, and Z going on later, and if I don't do it now, I won't get it done? Or is it merely just kind of like preference, just kind of arbitrary because I have this vague sense that we should be busy by 9 o'clock? So you really need to think about that when you're running a school. If there's in your home, if there's no reason why he can't do his work later in the day, then I would say let him do it.
Yeah, great response. Last question from anonymous. How can I encourage my sixth grader to put effort in his schoolwork? For example, when I go over his daily math work, he gets many questions wrong. However, once I sit him down and go over it with him, he magically knows the answers without much instruction. It is the same with other subjects, like he is going too quickly to just get the work done. It is frustrating and time consuming. Any suggestions?
I would find some way to incentivize him getting it right on his own. If you believe that he really could do it on his own, and it's just that he's plodding along and procrastinating, I would use a I would use a carrot and stick approach of like, I'm going to try to, if you successfully accomplish this, then this reward follows. We're going to Pavlov dog him with some reward, to where it's like, okay, there's a real incentive for me to do this now, and there's a disincentive for me not to do it, right? There's nothing wrong with doing that. It can be a reward of some sort of free time or screen time or some sort of, whatever, but kind of incentivize them to do that. They say and now this will be my last thing. In education, they say that there's intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is the motivation we get just from the joy of completing something, right? And then there's extrinsic motivation, which is like, if I complete this task, I get this reward. Sometimes you have to fall back on that second kind of motivation, as a means of helping them to learn the value of the first kind of motivation. So yeah, I would say incentivize it.
Yeah, I think incentivization for boys is very good. It's a key ingredient. Find their hot button. Find their hot button, and I
There you
promise
go.
it'll pay off. Yeah.
Find the hot button.
Yep.
Quotes to live
Great.
by.
Phillip, thank you very much. Round of applause, everybody. This has been great.